All right, everybody. Good Thursday evening. Meteorologist Alex Carter with you in the Fox 54 Digital Weather Center. You're viewing us on a lot of platforms right now, whether it's Fox 54 live stream on WFXG.com. You can see that also on our Fox 54 news app and weather apps, and you can also find us here on Facebook and YouTube. So good evening. Of course, a lot of preparations, a lot of talk about the winter weather. That's what we're going to be discussing here tonight on Weather Aware Live. So sorry for the brief delay. We were just ironing a few of the kinks out, and we are ready to go to answer your questions and give you that most accurate forecast as we head into this weekend. Remember, we're still going to tweak things a little bit, but the general trends and a lot of this we have nailed down at this point as we head into Friday, and of course, the day after that is when all of this begins to start. So a couple days out from the event starting, and we're starting to get a lot more of our questions answered, and we're going to be able to answer your questions as well. So going to let a few more of you filter in. Good evening, Amy. Amy is a very passionate weather watcher. Amy, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and hope you're doing well. And let's see, we got enough people in here. We can go ahead and get started with a lot of this, and we'll go ahead and show you this. Okay, so freezing rain accumulations are the big story. That's what we're expecting here. Travel issues, power outages, all of those things. And this is going to start up Saturday afternoon and evening, and the accumulations will really start to pick up Saturday evening and continue into Sunday. Accumulations on Monday, I'm not going to rule it out just yet, but I think most of this gets out of the way by Monday morning, and we are going to have some black ice on Monday as well. Frigid temperatures and wind chill, that's also an impact of this. It's going to be cold all weekend. It's going to get very bone-chilling cold early next week as we get some of those lows near 15 degrees. But let's go ahead and look at this again from the outside perspective. We do have a winter storm watch now, and I'm going to take myself off the screen so you can see this. Winter storm watch Saturday afternoon through Monday morning, and this is for areas such as the Augusta Metro. This is Aiken, Richmond, Columbia counties, Jefferson County, Glasscock County, even south of I-20. That winter storm watch is intact. And I do want to show you something here. Notice where the outer edge of that winter storm watch is tracing. It's tracing I-16, and that's going to be a big part of the forecast and kind of a pattern that we will follow as we head into the next couple of days, because it's areas in the cold air wedge setup that have the highest chance of seeing those accumulations and impacts. And right now, the bottom line with this system is the further north of I-20 you go, the worse the impacts get. I'm going to repeat that so you can hear me and make sure you've got that kind of down pat. The further north of I-20 you go, the worse the impacts will be. And again, anywhere from the Augusta Metro and points north really needs to pay close attention to this system for the most disruptive impacts. There are a few areas that we're going to be closely monitoring with this storm. It's going to be, again, areas along I-20. That includes Augusta, Aiken, North Augusta, Evans, Martinez, Grovetown, Fort Gordon, Thompson, and points northward. These are the areas that could see the most severe of the impacts. Now, again, we're not going to scare you here. We're not going to panic. I don't want anybody to panic with this storm. What I want you to do is just simply take those precautions and be prepared in the event that you could see conditions without power for a window of about, say, 2 to 3 days. And that's a realistic impact if we see enough ice. So let's start out with a few questions here. Thank you, Michelle, for asking this. Michelle Harvey asked, do you think the winter storm watch will extend to Barnwell County? It's a very tough call, but I do think that could extend further south, Michelle, yes. I don't know if it exactly will or not because, again, the fine line with this is going to be along and north of I-20. The impacts in Barnwell, Burke, Jefferson County, it's just not very feasible that they could see significant impacts, okay? But it is, I'm not going to rule it out. So the areas that have the highest opportunity to see significant winter weather are going to be along and north of Interstate 20. So right now, Michelle, I'm going to say no, but I'm not going to rule it out entirely. So I hope that helps your question, if you will. And let's go ahead and show you kind of the impact levels with this event. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take myself off the screen again so you can kind of see this bit by bit. Highest impacts, Washington, Lincolnton, McCormick, Edgefield, northern Aiken County, northern Columbia County, Clarks Hill Lake areas. these are the places that could see up to a half an inch of ice, and that leads to significant accumulations, which means higher concern for power outages, the travel issues, and black ice that could linger into Monday, hopefully not Tuesday. I think Monday is the furthest outer edge that we could see those impacts, but we might see some black ice lingering into Tuesday if everything goes in a downward trend. So that's something to watch out for. The Augusta Metro, this is where we're watching for potential for moderate impacts. Things like spotty, scattered power outages, slick roadways that are hazardous to travel on, black ice on Monday morning. Again, you would be seeing just a lower magnitude of what we could see just a hair to the north of you. But again, we are working with razor thin margins, okay? This is why I'm telling you this. Edgefield to Augusta, all right? We're not talking, but maybe 20 miles there. 20 miles, razor thin margins between what could be more significant impacts and what could be moderate impacts. So that's why I don't want you to let your guard down, but I also don't want you to panic and be scared, okay? If you're prepared for this system, the worst it can do is, again, cause some travel issues, some power outages, and unfortunately, we could see some downed trees with this if the ice accumulation piles up high enough. But again, this is going to be the trend. The further north of I-20 you go, the worse the impacts will be. Let's see. Marty, yeah, that's a good point. Marty sarcastically says, yay for me up here in Lincolnton. Marty, again, I think, a half an inch of ice accumulation, very possible in your area. Again, just making sure we have those simple preparedness plans in place, and taking those precautions does a world of good. Justin says, I was hoping Grovetown should be fine. I think that Grovetown, again, you're right there in the metro. I think a quarter of an inch of ice is a very real possibility. Now, again, I'm going to show you some things that actually might be encouraging, but we're also going to show you the caveats to that as well. So here's our first call on ice totals across the area. Here's what you can expect based on the region. Notice how we've got Augusta right on that fine line, where a quarter of an inch is likely, but any shifts slightly south could give you up to a half an inch of ice. Any shifts north could give Augusta just about a tenth of an inch of ice. And there's a lot of evidence that supports that. So, again, we're right on that edge. And any signs that that cold air wedge is going to stay over us, we can expect the higher totals with this particular event. If the cold air wedge erodes, we could see the lower end totals with this event. So we're watching here and just making sure we're answering all these questions. So Bronson, good question there. Bronson asked if an ice storm warning is going to be possible. And I think the answer to that is yes, but I think it's going to be mainly for areas along and north of Interstate 20. So the highest chance of an ice storm warning is Wilkes, Lincoln, McCormick, Edgefield County, and Crawford or Tolliver County and near Crawfordville. Those are the counties that I think have the highest chance of seeing an ice storm warning if we were to see that. I think a lot of us by tomorrow or Saturday could be included in a winter weather advisory, which is a step up from a winter storm warning, or a step up from a winter storm watch, I should say. But all that to say, just make sure that you have that preparedness plan in place. Make sure you've taken those precautions. And here's that checklist, by the way. I do want to run through that just so you can make sure you have that. Here's the winter storm checklist. And again, warm clothing and blankets, of course, that's a big piece to this. Filling up on gas, making sure you've got food, the non-perishable foods, bottled water, generator, flashlight, extra batteries, all that good stuff. The simple precautions that can make a world of difference. When we talk about these ice totals, which you see back here, ice has a different impact than snow and sleet. So sleet pellets, think of it like ping pong balls, right? It's going to bounce off. It's not going to stick to anything. It's not like glue. Freezing rain is kind of like glue in a lot of ways. It's going to stick to whatever it falls on, and that's the problem because ice adds weight. For every half an inch of ice that gets coated onto a surface, that's an extra 500 pounds that's put onto that surface. So if it's a tree, a half an inch of ice, That's 500 pounds added onto it. So again, you just want to go ahead and let you know that those ice impacts are based on the totals of those accumulations. So again, here it is. And anywhere from 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. Ice collects on trees in this scenario, so we are expecting ice to collect on trees across a lot of the CSRA. The bridges, the overpasses, and some roadways will have slick spots on them. That's a given, especially if you get up to that 1/4 inch territory. Isolated power outages are possible in this scenario. So the power going out from 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, that's possible, but it's going to be very spotty. It won't be widespread in the areas that see anywhere from 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch. But now we take it up to the next level. And the next level is areas of 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. Lots of branch loss in this scenario. Lots of those heavier branches can fall. The roadways will be slick, that's a given, and we'll see more power outages because once you get up closer to that echelon of 3/4 of an inch of ice accumulation, power outages become more and more likely. And then, of course, in that worst case scenario where we see significant ice storm impacts from 1/2 an inch and up, widespread tree damage happens, power's out for a long time, and travel, you can basically go nowhere until that melting process begins. But again, right now, it looks like most of the CSRA will be in the family of 1/10 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice. So the catastrophic impacts, we could easily avoid those, okay? Everybody's been asking, is this 2014? The best way to answer that question is don't compare this to 2014, just be prepared. And again, I don't think that we're going to see 2014 impacts across most of the CSRA, all right? I don't even think we see it in most, if not 95%. What we're looking at is areas along and north of I-20 that could pose a hazard. And we're looking at areas like Lincolnton, McCormick, Washington, Edgefield. These are the places where we really watch and say, okay, this is where the impacts could start to pile up and become really significant in a few spots. And that's why we don't want to generalize just one area. Now, let me show you this. This is what I've been wanting to show because some people have been seeing our in-house model run at on different sources, and they're looking at this, right? And they're looking at, oh, okay, well, this is the expected ice impact Sunday at 1 o'clock. Sunday at 1 o'clock. And you would look at this and you'd think, okay, this looks really good for us. And I hope this solution comes true. And I think we all do, where we just get a few hundredths of an inch of ice. That would be a no-brainer, right? However, the catch to that is there's where the razor-thin margins come into play. And, I'm going to measure this out. There is about a 40-mile swath between what could be a little bit and a whole lot in a troublesome winter storm. And so that's why we don't want you to let your guard down. This model is not picking up on a few features. One of those features is something we call the cold air wedge. The cold air wedge is right here, and I'm going to point to it. Right in here, and it's that fishbowl, if you will, that dips down. This is what we call cold air damming. This phenomenon is something that has a really tough time being picked up on by the models, particularly the Euro. Look at the warm nose. We've been touching on the warm nose the past couple of days, right? But how strong is this high to the north, and how strong is the cold air damming? Because cold air damming can be very strong. It can turn a day that we expected to be near 60 degrees near 50. And if this cold air wedge holds, if it holds, that means that we could stay below freezing for quite a lengthy period of time. That's what we want you to be weary of. That's what we want you to be prepared for. Because, again, if that cold air wedge sticks and the low weakens, we could see a prolonged area of freezing rain, which could pile up the ice totals. How this works is, basically put, the stronger the cold air wedge, the higher chance that we see sub-freezing temperatures for a long period of time. The longer we see freezing temperatures, the longer we get freezing rain. And the longer we get freezing rain, the more accumulations and the higher the impacts. That's the domino effect that we're watching out for here. So again, I don't want you to let your guard down just because you're seeing some promising totals from the in-house model. How long does the wedge hold? We never underestimate the cold air wedge around here, and that's what we're looking at here. The longer it holds, the longer freezing rain's possible. And the longer period of freezing rain, the higher the impacts. So again, the cold air wedge, we've got to account for the fact that the models have done a poor job in the past of accounting for how cold it could stay. And if that is the case, then we've got to watch out for higher freezing rain accumulations. That's why we are not going with what our in-house model says right now, because we're picking up on the trend that the wedge could give us higher totals. That's why you'll see these in your particular area. Again, the GFS wants to show you totals pretty similar to this, and so does the Euro. The Euro has now started to backtrack, and the GFS data is a little bit more reliable now because we do have, and let me show you that model comparison. There it is. The GFS data is more reliable now because the hurricane hunters have dropped what we call dropsondes, which is upper level measurables, into the upper atmosphere. And that's what's collecting data for us. That's what's giving us slightly more reliable numbers. And the Euro and the GFS are in pretty good agreement right now. Along and north of I-20, this is the focal point for where we really want to zero in on for this particular system. And so we want you to be weather aware for that. And again, just have the essentials, non-perishable foods, bottled water, all that good stuff, and you can stay ahead of the game with this particular storm system. So I'm going to go ahead and start answering questions real quick. And we've got a pretty good chunk of these. Hunter Brinkman, what time will all of this start on Saturday? This is going to start up around, say, 3, 4 in the afternoon, Hunter. I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the Futurecast look. There we go. All right. So this is at about, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And notice where the freezing line's at. Still not here yet. It's still not here yet. And that's going to be another piece to the forecast. So freezing line is still to the north of us. But through the afternoon, we expect that freezing line to come down. And once it does, about 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, that's when all this begins to turn to freezing rain. The wedge is going to come down. It's going to drop our temperatures, and the freezing rain is going to start as we head into Saturday evening and overnight Saturday. Then we're going to continue to see that freezing rain overnight Saturday night into early Sunday morning. And then notice as we get into the tail end of this, there's a big gap in the Futurecast, and this is at around, say, 2 in the afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and show you kind of what it looks like out to the west. Notice how all that's a cold rain. That's on this particular model. Okay, that is not necessarily the case in the Euro model runs and in the GFS model runs. Okay, this is saying that the warm air is going to win later in the day. I just don't buy that right now. I just can't buy that entirely at this point. I hope that's the case, but that's why we're making sure that you're weather aware and making sure to let you know that the models are not always right. We're expecting those contingencies in the models to potentially come true. So, Lacey, good question. How come none of this is showing up on the radar anywhere and no one has seen this at all? It's going to start up on Friday, and it's going to start up tomorrow, actually. That's Friday in Oklahoma and Texas. This is going to start up right as soon as that area low pressure and the cold polar air meet. And once that happens, it's game on for parts of the deep south. And let's see, I'm looking at your questions. Let's see, Lacey, yes, all this is going to start up Friday, and then it's going to move east. So none of this is going to really kick up in our area until Saturday afternoon and evening. Hannah, good question. When can we expect the worst as far as accumulations that would cause power outages? I'm in Thompson for reference. Okay, Hannah, so we're expecting accumulations to really pile up once we get to Saturday evening and through Sunday morning. That's going to be the window for the heaviest totals. Now, again, temperatures are expected to be potentially below freezing for much of the day on Sunday. If that holds true, then we're going to see slick roads starting Saturday night, and we're going to see slick roads throughout the day Sunday. So I would expect slick roadways anywhere from Saturday night, even all the way through Monday morning, because even, let's say we even did melt a little bit on Sunday afternoon, we would still have some black ice to worry about on Monday morning in a few spots. So prepare for impacts all the way through Monday morning, and that looks to be the highest impact zone. Anytime, Lacey, by the way. And Hannah, I hope that answers your question a little bit better. Let's see. Amy, that's a good question. Is there an analog event or an event or an even theory on if lows tend to weaken as events approach? This low, it's kind of, think of it like a tropical system, Amy. You know, this low that we're talking about, let me try to see if I can get a good graphic up here to illustrate this. This is a pretty good one here. Think of this low as like a tropical system, right? Think of it, let's say it were a hurricane. There's a lot of wind shear and there's a lot of surface flow that's kind of cutting into the storm, right? So the cold air damming, if it is strong, it's going to try to rip that low apart, and it is going to try to weaken it. Analog-based, that would be some really deep dives. I haven't looked into the analogs for that particular feature, Amy, but I do think that there's probably something that does suggest that lows running up against the wedge have a hard time keeping their forward speed. And this low, we're talking about when it's down to less than, it's not even going to get down into the low 1000s for millibars. So it's not a very strong low, and it's going up against a really strong high. That's why I think the cold air wedge will win out for a good chunk of this particular event. So I hope that answers your question a little bit better, Amy. Let's see. Leanne, I'm not going to rule that out. I think there is a chance that some spots could stay freezing rain free. Right now, do I think that's likely? No, but I think there's a chance that, especially depending on where you live, Leanne, I think if it's south of I-20, I think those impacts could be a lot less than areas from the Augusta Metro and points north. Again, the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. Is this 2014? Likely no. Far from it. And is it going to be a little bit of nothing? Probably not that either. We're still going to have some disruptions, and enough that you should still plan to be without power and to be not trapped in, but I would say for travel issues to be there Sunday, Monday, and hopefully not Tuesday. But by Monday afternoon, some of that melting really starts to kick in, I think. Jeff, that's a good point. And Jeff, if you're still watching, thanks for that question. That's a good aspect to touch on. How will the wind gust be? And the wind gust, we're expecting really to kick up on Monday. Monday is when the gust could be more of the concern because the cold front will pass through. I think we could see some gusts up to about 25 to 30. Hopefully not, but that's another piece to the forecast on Monday morning as that front begins to blow in. So the gusts will pick up. I think it'll be breezy Sunday, but I don't think it's going to be that significant. I think the wind gust, if we're going to see that playing a major role, Monday morning is when that would play a role, Jeff. Let's see. Leanne, yep, and Evans, again, I think, some freezing rain is pretty much a guarantee in your area right now. It could be as little as 1/10 of an inch. It could be as significant as 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, somewhere in that zone, and we're going to continue to narrow down that zone as we head into the next several days. Alicia, great question. Are you expecting this to move south from your experience? I think that's the X factor right now. If there's a hidden ingredient in the forecast that could see this shift south, it is the cold air wedge. And let's hope it doesn't. I really hope that's not the case. But again, that's why we always want to prepare a step above what we're expecting, right? We say this with the tropics. We say this with winter storms and severe weather. You always want to prepare for a level above what might even happen. And so if you do that, you're going to be good to go. So, Alicia, I do think that we could see a southward trend. The euro with the last run did start to move a little further south. And I think the euro might be starting to pick up on, we've got a really strong area of high pressure that's producing that damming, and that damming is going to stay right along I-16 just south of us, which traps us in the cooler air. So that's a good point to make. Jennifer asked about snow. Will we see any snow? No snow. And I don't want to burst anybody's hopes or bubble, if you will. If you want snow, you heard it here, probably not first. You've probably seen it on social media, but we're watching a system that, dare I say, might produce snow in our area next weekend. That's what the early model trend suggests. The upper level setup, the northern branch and the southern branch of the jet stream, that is something that we're watching. Again, I think that it's not going to be snow this time. And again, I do think we could see some snow next week. If you're interested in that, of course, that's something we'll be talking about next week in the forecast. But we got to focus on one thing at a time. And right now, it is the threat of ice in our area. Let's see. Again, and this is the big part of the forecast. We're not trying to scare people into thinking it's 2014 all over again. Okay. We do not want to do that. We are not fear-mongering. We don't want to hype. We don't want to scare anyone, but we just want to let you know that this is the ceiling of what's possible, and if that were realized, some people would definitely have some issues as we head into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So just be weather aware, prepare for that, and again, nothing to over-prepare for, but again, just make sure you have those basics intact and checked off the list, and if you got those, you're going to be good to go. And hopefully we won't see too many downed trees in many spots. Once we get to half an inch of ice, that's when downed trees become my biggest concern. And that right now looks to be north of I-20. And along I-20, a few downed trees can't be ruled out. Jeff, I definitely think a flash freeze in Wilkes County will be possible. So anything that drops, it's going to stick, especially further north where the warm air is really intact. And that's where it is in your area, Jeff. Star, thank you for that question. And there are going to be some questions about school, so I do appreciate you asking. I don't make those calls, and we try to provide you with that information and the impacts that it brings, and obviously we want them to make the call, and that's how that works. I do think there is a chance, though, that there will be some slick roads still Sunday night and Monday morning that could lead to impacts for school. So I do think that there is a solid chance potentially that Richmond and Columbia County schools could be closed or at least a delayed start on Monday. So I think kids could be delayed or if not out of school. We've already announced some e-learning days on Fox 54 in the newscast. So again, just keep in mind that those are going to be listed on Fox 54, WFXG.com. So you can tune in on our newscast and you can get that information there as well. And let's see. Thunder sleet, that's funny. No thunder snow in this one, no thunder sleet. That'd be funny, though. Let's see. So, Evan, the main event is going to begin starting Saturday, mainly Saturday evening, around 5, 6 in the afternoon. And once those accumulations happen for a few hours, slick spots will start to form on the road Saturday night. And then it's not going to leave until Monday morning. Let's see, sifting through here, and I apologize if I'm not seeing your questions because we got a good chunk of them. And there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and switch pages as well, just so we can make sure to answer everybody's questions. We're going to go to Fox. There we go. So if you're watching us on a live stream, we're actually live streaming on our website, WFXG.com, the Fox 54 weather and news apps. You can find us there. And we're also on your Fire Stick and your Roku app. So if you have Fire Stick, if you have Roku TV, anything like that, if you want to watch us during the storm and you actually can get TV, you have the generator hooked up to the TV, you can actually use that and get us there on Roku, Fire Stick, and all that good stuff, and on our news app on your cell phone. And you can also, of course, watch us here on Facebook and YouTube. That's where we've really started this up. I do want to point out this program, which is called Weather Aware Live. And Weather Aware Live, again, is a live stream, very casual setting where you can get your questions answered. Tonight we started a little bit after 7:30, working out a few kinks there. But again, Weather Aware Live. We do this even when there's not as eventful weather, even though that's not going to be the case for quite a while. You'll be able to find us here. And Weather Aware Live is where you can find us and for live updates. We get into the weeds a little bit more than you would see on television. We have just a few minutes to get the point across and to get the bottom line across. So when you see us there, we're not going to get to dive into it and answer your questions one by one like we are here. That's the plus of joining us on something like this. So thank you guys for joining. Thank you for asking your questions. And we do appreciate that. Yeah, CJ, great question. So we kind of ride the line south of I-20 in Thompson, but not by much. So what's it looking like? CJ, I think, if you're along I-20, this is where we're on that razor-thin margin. The CSRA is about 120 miles long from north to south, from about Mount Carmel in northern McCormick County all the way down to Oak Park in Emmanuel County. that's a long area to cover. So there's a lot of different impacts depending on where you are. And our area, because we see the cold air damming and the cold air wedge, that usually creates those razor-thin lines between what can be much more noticeable impacts and minor impacts. But the best thing to do is prepare a level above what your area could see. So again, prepare for an ice storm and hope for just minor accumulations that could just very briefly impact and disrupt our daily life, mainly on Sunday. So if I had to pick a day where your day might be the most impacted from start to finish, it's Sunday. Sunday's going to be the most impactful day from start to finish for all of this. Saturday night is when conditions go downhill, and Monday morning is the last of the icy conditions before we start to melt out of it. Now remember, if we get higher ice accumulations, Tuesday would be the last day because temperatures are not going to climb very far Monday afternoon, but we are expecting sunshine, upper 30s, low 40s. That should start to melt us a little bit. What doesn't melt will refreeze, and we could deal with black ice on Tuesday morning. So again, looking at the margins here, the margins are very thin. But I don't want you to get nervous. This is 2014 all over again. Don't start working up those scenarios in your head for something that might not happen. And just want to emphasize that as we get into all this. Gwen, appreciate that. Always appreciate your comments. Thanks for joining us tonight and watching from Robinson Ave in Grovetown. Thank you for that. So again, your questions, always appreciated. And again, we're just answering those and trying to hammer down that forecast. I'm about to do a forecast review. So if you are still joining us, again, good evening and welcome into Weather Aware Live. Simon, good question. What does the impact look like for those of us who are south of I-20 but close to I-20 in southern Richmond County? Yeah, so Simon, I think the best way to describe this is, if downtown Augusta sees a lot of ice, I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's a possibility. So if you're living near downtown Augusta, Hepzibah, Blythe, those are areas where you're still on the margin line. I think ice totals will be lower in your area in comparison to an Evans or an Appling or a Clarks Hill Lake. So I do think, you could see up to 1/4 of an inch of ice, but I think that's about your ceiling if you're south of I-20 in southern Richmond County. And, yep, Jenny, that's the other good question. So thank you for that. She says, I know we're discussing this weekend, but what's going on next weekend? So we got to take this one at a time. Obviously, our focus right now is on the here and now with this potential ice threat that's starting to develop. But the snow threat next week, there's a chance at snow. Again, the models are still roughly 9 days out. So 9 days out, you could not predict it even if we tried. Not even close. I mean, it'd be better if I had a blindfold, got spun around 3 times, and then tried to throw the bullseye. I'd miss and probably hit something. So that's about the same effect as 9 days out with a snow event. Hannah, our news department will know a lot more about that. We should be salting the roads. I think the city could be salting those. I know GDOT is salting I-20. The brine, all of that. So I know that GDOT is on it. About the city of Augusta, I know that we did have a press conference today, and you can actually find a live stream of that press conference on WFXG's Facebook page, which is where you might be watching. So you can tune in there and find out as well. Michelle, thanks for that question. Gerard, Waynesboro. I think it's about 1/10 of an inch of ice, some black ice, slippery spots, but the impacts in Gerard and Waynesboro, if you're there on 24 or 26, any of those roads, or 23 it might be, I think you're going to be on the lower end impact of this. We're mainly focusing from the Augusta Metro points north. If a southward trend shows up, we'll be the first to let you know. But right now, we're expecting anywhere from, 1/10 of an inch of ice to 1/2 an inch of ice from our southern to northern counties. And again, we might up those totals north of I-20 if we start to see that trend developing. Because remember, we never underestimate the cold air wedge, which if you might be wondering what that looks like, let me show you. This is what we're talking about, the wedge that sets up. And, the Euro and the GFS are, respecting the wedge now, which is something that I think we should be doing. Totals, again, highest anywhere from Louisville, Waynesboro, Barnwell, and points to the north. That's where the impacts will start. If you're in Swainsboro, Millen, Sylvania, Allendale, it's looking overall pretty good for you right now. And I hope that trend continues for y'all. Hopefully, along the north of I-20, we can see a northward trend. But right now, that's not something that we see. So here's those totals. And that's Euro and GFS there. Jenny, family in Tignal, I would let them know that there is a threat of a pretty good amount of ice, especially because you're in northern Wilkes County. You're not just on the southern end. You're along and north of Highway 378, roughly. So, yeah, I think that there is a threat of some significant ice totals there in Tignal, Georgia. And shout out to Marianne Crowder. Thanks for tuning in. Marianne, it's good to hear from you as always. I hope to visit at some point soon. As always, it's been a minute, so got to come in for Christmas, but hope to visit at some point soon. Let's see. What are the chances? Michelle, good question, that it could trend more south. With the cold air wedge, I wouldn't put anything past it. That's why we're showing you these Euro and GFS latest totals, because the GFS data is getting a lot better now, because the GFS data, the hurricane hunters, put in some radio signs. That's some upper-level measurements, and they got to measure the upper atmosphere. And with that better data, we're starting to get a better idea of what can shake out. So I do think that southward trend is pretty much where we have it on our forecast. Again, if you haven't seen our first call, we're going to go ahead and get you to our first call here. Here it is. The further north you go, the more significant the ice totals become. 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. That's that window that we're going to be looking out for. 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch of ice, anywhere from the Augusta Metro and south. But the Augusta Metro does have that chance of a few higher totals above 1/4 of an inch. I do want to emphasize that, so we're not ruling that out just yet. So live stream, Facebook Live, all these places you're watching us. Again, we're going to be here during the storm. I do want to emphasize that. So we're going to answer a few more questions before we get off for the night. And we're going to have updates, of course, coming up at 10 and 11. And we should have new data coming out in just a little over an hour. And when we get that, of course, we'll be the first to share it. I don't think our high-res data is going to change very much just yet. But, again, we'll post that when we get it. So we're going to be here throughout the storm. And so when we're covering this on Saturday night, starting Saturday night and working its way into Sunday, we'll be here for it. So you can tune in to eNews at WFXG.com. If you have questions about the forecast, send us an email. And, of course, more importantly, you can watch us on live stream here on Facebook, on our Fox 54 YouTube page. You can catch that all on the cell phone. All on the cell phone. So make sure you have a portable charger. Make sure you can stream and watch us for those updates as they come in. And, of course, you can tune into WFXG.com and our WFXG News app to get those latest updates. I'm actually looking right now on our weather app. And our weather app will show you the winter storm watch that's in effect and all that good stuff, too. Let's see. So you can see us live right now on our Fox 54 weather app. You can also find us live on the Fox 54 News app. And these are places that are going to be valuable resources, especially digitally, in the event that the power did go out. Now, obviously, we're going to be covering this on Fox 54 through the weekend as well. Want to let you know about that. But, again, if the power did go out or you lost connection, anything like that, we are here to answer your questions and walk you through it. Hey, I appreciate that, Noah. Thanks for that kind word. Appreciate that for, this is a stressful forecast. It makes you want to pull your hair out. It is just one of those. Let's see. Yep, okay, I'm going to get to those questions in just a moment, seeing a big crop of those moving in. So, Noah, I appreciate that. It is a stressful forecast, razor-thin margins, and it's always in setups like these where, in forecasting school and weather school, we had to beat the model. So if you don't beat the model, you don't get a passing grade. That's pretty much what the theme of it is. So you got to find ways to beat the model. And so that's what we are seeing trends of here. This is how the model is not performing that well. It's not accounting for the cold air wedge. So hoping for the best, hoping for not a lot of ice, but expecting that some of that southward trend might happen. So again, we just want to keep you up to date and, of course, break down the latest updates here on Fox 54. I'm going to show you this map while we're talking. So getting a question, of course, anytime, Mary. Thanks for tuning in. Timothy Turner says Saturday a.m. to Monday noon for Augusta, Georgia. I think it's going to be Saturday evening, Timothy, through Monday morning. Once we get to Monday at noon, temperature should climb above freezing. That's a forecast. Monday into Tuesday is something we're fine-tuning. That's more based on what we see fall Saturday into Sunday. Gene, good question. Are we expecting the same thing next weekend? Too early to talk about next weekend. Early indications would say snow, but we might see nothing at all. It's 9 days out. It's like throwing a dart at a bullseye blindfolded. It's just very hard to do and nearly impossible. Gwen, good to know that your husband's a ham radio operator. Actually, our assistant engineer, Rusty Welsh, he is a ham radio operator as well. So really cool that y'all are in the same family there. Leah asked, what's Beach Island looking like for this weekend? Could it be the same as Augusta? Beach Island has the luxury of being just a little bit south of I-20, right? So the further south you go of I-20, the better chance that you have of staying away from the worst of the impacts. But again, I think you could see up to a quarter of an inch of ice, worst case scenario in Beach Island. Confident in saying that at this point. Michelle, good question. If it moves a little bit slower, what would that mean for Augusta? I think the forward speed of this is pretty much on track. I think, there's not much chance that this slows down. But let's say it did, the wedge would stay intact longer, and we could see slightly higher amounts of freezing rain. But the speed, not as much of a factor in this particular system as some previous storm events. So I wouldn't be worried as much about the speed as I would the strength of the low. Can that warm air surge northward? Because right now, I think the Euro is very much underestimating how far that cold air is going to drop south. So, again, in any of these questions might have been questions, if you're just joining us, that you can catch in this video. This video is going to be able for replay all through on Facebook. You can go through and actually scrub it, and that's a more efficient way of getting the details if you're not wanting to sift through what is 40 minutes of live Q&A here. So scrub through it. If you're just tuning in, we're about to get off of Weather Aware Live. We're going to have updates on the latest data later on tonight. And again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We appreciate your trust. We appreciate your trust in our forecast and walking with it through us here on Weather Aware Live. Again, you can find us here on Weather Aware Live, Facebook, YouTube, the Fox 54 News app, WFXG.com, watch live stream, and all that good stuff. And, of course, you can follow my page here, Meteorologist Alex Carter, and our Facebook page, WFXG Fox 54. Thank you guys so much for joining for another edition of Weather Aware Live. Stay safe. We'll have much more updates to come. You can also find those on Fox 54 News at 10 and 11. We hope you join us there. Stay safe and stay informed.